Hello and welcome to Nightlight's orientation for the Portugal Adoption Program. Once you view this video, a follow-up telephone call will be scheduled with your program coordinator to allow you to get to know each other better and to answer any questions you may have concerning the material presented in this webinar. When you received the Portugal orientation email, you probably noticed it had a checklist with many links to additional information. I urge you to save that email. Bookmark it, print it, do whatever you need to do to keep it because you will be required to access the checklist as you complete your parent education and prepare your dossier and will often need to refer to some of the information documents. In order to access the checklist in our portal, you will need to sign in using the same email and password you created when you filed your application. There is a link posted here and in the email for password help should you require it. We will be discussing several items to help you get started on your adoption journey, and hopefully by the end of this talk, you will have a better grasp on all that is required and an idea of where you need to start. I promise you that you will feel quite overwhelmed, but there are ways to break the process into parts so that it seems more manageable. Today we will go over HEG orientation topics, talk about choosing a home study provider, touch on parent education, discuss filing the I-600A with the United States Citizenship and Immigration Service, explain the service plan, and Portugal dossier instructions. We will begin by telling you a little bit about your program and our agency. Nightlight became licensed to work in Portugal in January of 2022. Historically, no U.S. adoption agencies were licensed to work there, so the U.S. government suggested U.S. agencies to apply for a license as from time to time they were receiving requests for international adoption from U.S. families. Nightlight has been in operation since the 1950s. In addition to many international programs, we offer domestic adoptions, home study services, foster programs, and we pioneered the Snowflake Embryo Adoption Program. The best way I have found to go through the documents is to have you open the Portugal orientation email. Open the orientation document checklist, and I will go through each document explaining its purpose and talking about specifics. Please take notes as you follow along and be sure to write down any questions you may have so we can answer them during the orientation phone call. The first document I want you to open is the Hague Orientation Topics for Portugal. It is important that you read this document thoroughly and in its entirety, but I'm going to hit some of the highlights. First, anyone who is adopting internationally must have an approved home study, apply to receive pre-approval to adopt from the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, or USCIS, and prepare a set of documents called a dossier, which will be submitted to Portugal for approval. Different countries require different documents, so that is why the linked dossier booklet has detailed written instructions and is specific to Portugal. Once your dossier is submitted, you will wait to be matched with a child. Agencies licensed to work in Portugal regularly receive information about waiting children in Portugal, and it is possible to be matched with a waiting child. They also have a committee that gathers to match children, and it is possible to be matched during the committee meeting. Once you are matched, you will have a referral review with our social service manager and have the file reviewed by a doctor that specializes in international adoption. You will also complete education that is specific to the child you are adopting. After that is complete, you can file your I-800. The I-800 approval will give you permission to bring the specific child or children you are adopting home to the United States. You will then travel to bring your child home. There is usually a 1-week bonding period in country. After 1 week of bonding period, or when appropriate, the child is transferred into your care and remains with your family throughout the balance of the stay. During the bonding time, you will be observed by the social worker, who will then make a recommendation to the court regarding your guardianship. Usually it takes about 8 to 10 weeks for all the legalities to take place in country. Then you will obtain a visa from the U.S. Embassy and bring your child home. After you arrive home with your child, you will be required to complete post-placement reports that must be submitted to Portugal. You will also need to finalize your adoption with an attorney in your state. In Portugal, the majority of children available for adoption are over age 8. Any child under the age of 8 will have special needs. There are also many older children available and sibling groups. As in the United States, children available for adoption in Portugal may have been relinquished or removed from their parents due to abuse or neglect. Often, children with special needs are abandoned in Portugal. This could be due to poverty or lack of education on the part of the child's parents. Most of the children waiting adoption in Portugal reside in orphanages or group homes. Children who live in orphanages or group homes generally experience delays because they are not receiving optimal care. They are likely to be delayed approximately 4 months for every year that they have spent in an orphanage setting. Portugal has laws that govern when and how a child can be made available for adoption. Domestic adoption is always a first choice, and if no domestic family can be found, children are then made eligible for international adoption. In general, Portugal does not separate siblings. The trend and climate of intercountry adoption has declined by almost 70% since 2004. The reason for this decline is a result of the shift in political acceptance of intercountry adoption. Most nations navigate two opposing forces, trying to accommodate adoptive parents and the needs of orphans while also satisfying powerful anti-adoption influences. The increasing difficulty in adopting internationally is actually intentional and meant to reduce the number of adoptions. The motive behind the anti-adoption movement is complicated, but includes national pride, political retaliation, and a well-meaning but naive desire to prefer indigenous orphan care solutions. Please be aware that throughout your adoption process, there can be delays in referral time and paperwork. Some delays are caused by both country holiday observances. The U.S. Embassy in any country honors both U.S. holidays and country holidays, which can delay appointments and other adoption processes within the U.S. Embassy. In general, international adoption is full of delays due to the process and the number of individuals and governments involved in the process. Nightlight is here to advocate for your family, but must also preserve the future adoptions from Portugal. This means that we must keep a positive working relationship with those in authority, and therefore cannot put any priority of one case above all other potential adoptions. Now let's talk about post-placement reports. Portugal requires a total of 5 post-placement reports. Your home study social worker will do an in-home visit and complete a report at 1, 3, 6, 9, and 12 months after you're returning home with your child. If you have not finalized your adoption in the 12 months after arriving home, you must continue a post-placement visit with your social worker to be submitted to Portugal every 3 months until finalization. Post-placement and post-adoption obligations should be taken very seriously. Our agency is held personally responsible for the supervision of your placement. It is very important that you comply with reporting, as adoption programs are placed in jeopardy when families do not fulfill their obligation. Failure to complete post-placement and post-adoption reporting puts our program at risk and may prohibit future families from adopting orphaned children. Please take note that we have very strongly worded language regarding post-placement and post-adoption obligations in the agreements you have signed for our agency, which allows us to take you to court for non-compliance. While we haven't had to file a court case, we have had to send letters reminding families of their promise. It is also important to note that the U.S. Department of State enforces post-adoption compliance. Failure to comply will also affect any plans you may have to adopt in the future. One last thing regarding Hague topics. No fees should ever be paid to a foreign supervised provider, an adoption central authority, and/or any other person involved in your adoption case in a foreign country without written permission from your Nightlight coordinator. If you are asked to pay any fees in country that are not outlined in your adoption fee schedule, please notify our office immediately. Bribes are strictly prohibited and will be reported to the U.S. Department of State. I've gone over most everything in this document. If you have thoroughly read it and understand it, you can sign electronically, date, and submit. Of course, if you have questions about the content, be sure to ask those during our orientation phone call. Next, we will talk about choosing a home study provider. Nightlight is your placing agency for Portugal. If you live in a state where we have an office, we will also be your home study agency. If you live outside of our service area, you must choose a home study provider. It is important that you use a Hague-accredited agency to complete your home study. If you live in a state served by Nightlight, you will soon be contacted by that office to begin the home study process. If you do not, there is more information to help you locate an approved Hague-accredited provider in the orientation email. You may contact me and I can guide you in finding an approved provider in your state. Finally, once your application has been accepted by the Home Study Provider Agency, please complete and upload the Home Study Provider Information Sheet in the International Orientation Checklist. This is a very important note. If you begin the home study process prior to providing Nightlight with your home study provider information, you may have to choose another provider, which can result in losing any money you paid to the previous provider. Once your home study is completed, which can take anywhere from 2 to 4 months, depending on how quickly you and your social worker are able to obtain documentation, you will be ready to file Form I-800A, Application for Determination of Suitability to Adopt a Child from a Convention Country with USCIS. The link to that form can be found in your orientation checklist, but I will provide you with specific instructions for completing this once you have neared the end of the home study process. When you received the orientation email and opened the portal, you had access to an orientation document checklist, as well as a separate checklist for international parent education documents. A link was provided to a webinar explaining Nightlight's parent education requirements. If you have not yet watched this, you must so that your parent education will not be delayed. As a recap, all international adoptive families are required to complete 10 hours of Hague education prior to completing their home study. Additional requirements consist of reading about and understanding post-adoption stress and depression, completing a post-adoption support plan and respite care provider form, learning about the history and culture of your child's country, speaking with an alumni family who has previously adopted a child from Portugal through Nightlight, and reading a book titled The Connected Child. You will end up with more than 10 hours of education to help prepare you for parenting an adoptive child. The service plan is a document that identifies the 6 adoption services that are rendered in inter-country adoption and who is responsible for each service throughout your adoption process. Nightlight Christian Adoptions is your primary provider and placing agency for a child from Portugal. As the primary provider, we will coordinate your adoption. We will be working with the Portugal Central Authority and our attorney in country. The appropriate authorities in Portugal confirms that parental rights are terminated and the child is available for inter-country adoption. The authorities in Portugal work with Nightlight in-country coordinators and its staff to ensure that the laws of the country are followed. They also make non-judicial determination of the child's best interest in placement. Nightlight will coordinate any documents necessary for your adoption with these authorities. Your home study provider will perform the home study on you as the prospective adoptive parent. On this form, please fill in the name of your home study agency and their phone number, as well as the social worker from that agency and their contact information. Also in this document is a list of contacts at Nightlight who work in the Portugal program, as well as our email addresses. You will primarily work with the program coordinator, but the executive director is available if an issue arises. The Portugal program is ran out of the Indiana office. Your home study provider will visit you at specified times following the placement to provide consultation on adjustment, help you identify or problem solve any issues, and write a report to send along with photos of your child to Nightlight, who will then forward them to Portugal. Again, post-placement reports to Portugal are required at 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and 12 months after placement. If you have not finalized your adoption in the 12 months after arriving home, you must continue a post-placement visit with your social worker to be submitted to Portugal every 3 months until finalization. It is important to know, and you will be reminded of this throughout the process. If you are struggling with your adoption or having adjustment issues with the child when you get home, please contact us and let us help you identify resources and rally your family, friends, church, and other professionals to provide support and guidance to you. We have a post-adoption connection center ready and willing to provide resources to families. I understand that when you're going through the adoption process, you are likely soaking up all the information, learning everything you can, and wanting to prove that you are worthy to adopt. And I understand how difficult it may be to go back to those same people and admit that you need help. But we want you to be successful, and we know that sometimes there's a lot of stress and struggle through the transition phase and beyond. We want to be a beacon of light to you and work with you to ensure a successful placement, a well-adjusted child, an attached, happy, and loving family. Once you fill in your home study provider information to this document, please sign, date, and upload to the portal. The last thing is the dossier instruction booklet. I trust that you have read this booklet thoroughly. I will go over these items in detail during our scheduled phone call. Prior to the call, I encourage you to read through the booklet again. Make notes, write down specific questions, and please highlight bold text and other important information. You will refer back to this booklet quite often as you complete the required forms and gather your dossier documents. You are welcome to reach out to us once you start gathering your dossier documents if you have any questions. To wrap up the orientation, I want to remind you of the checklist on our online portal with some orientation documents you need to either sign and upload or sign electronically. Be sure to watch the video explaining our parent education requirements and look at all of the education documents under the International Parent Education Checklist in our portal. Again, it is also important that you read the entire dossier booklet, which contains more specific information about the dossier. You will often refer back to this booklet for specific forms and instructions. You're probably wondering, where in the world do I start? What do I do next? My suggestion is to identify a home study provider that is HEG accredited. Once you contact with them, you can finish the service plan and home study information sheet in the orientation checklist. Then you can begin your parent education. Do not forget to submit education documents as they are completed. In addition, we always want you to feel free to contact us with any questions, comments, or concerns you may have. This concludes the webinar. Please email your program coordinator after you have watched all of the videos and are ready to have the follow-up orientation phone call. Thank you, and I hope you have a wonderful day.